Most people, when they say they're building something, around the idea of the metaverse, they immediately are jumping to some application where you can go in and be in a spot with lots of different people and characters and stuff like that. And we think they start at the end instead of starting at the beginning. In the beginning, you should start with stories, and then you can create characters out of those stories, and then you can create content on top of those characters, and then you can create activities, and then you can create spaces, and then you can create worlds.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad, and I'm joined here by my co-host from 4RC Nomadic. In this episode, we're talking with Aaron McDonald, the co-founder and CEO of Futureverse. Futureverse is a leader in revolutionary metaverse and AI technologies that will enable open, scalable, and interoperable apps, games, and experiences. If you're familiar with some of the most popular NFT collections since 2021, Futureverse is the umbrella entity that develops Web3 native IP such as Flufs, AI League, Altered State Machine, Party Bears, Seekers, Cool Cats, The Next Legends, Gods and Goblins, and more. Despite the crypto winter the last few years, Futureverse recently announced raising $54 million to, quote, marry AI and the Metaverse. Stay tuned as Aaron guides us through the massive undertaking to develop Futureverse's iconic IP that will benefit from AI and the digitally native rails of the Metaverse. But before we get started, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge podcast possible. For most of us, our crypto journey started with MetaMask. And now with MetaMask Portfolio, we can do so much more. MetaMask Portfolio puts you in control. Use the dashboard to see all your assets and balances across your wallets in one place. The buy feature allows us to buy crypto assets effortlessly with fiat options such as PayPal or credit card. The swap feature allows us to swap any tokens anytime by finding a selection of available rates. The bridge feature allows us to bridge between networks including Ethereum, L1s, and L2s based on the best price and fastest delivery time. And with the stake feature, anyone in a few clicks can stake ETH and earn rewards. Do more in Web3 your way with a safe, simple, and convenient tool that's all in one place. Track and manage your Web3 everything at metamask.io/portfolio. Whether you're a trader, farmer, analyst, or newbie, you can trade smart with KyberSwap, the OG decentralized exchange and aggregator on 13 chains. Swap at the best rates, farm with real yields, set limit orders, use their proprietary trading and AI tools with the best UX in DeFi, securely and permissionlessly. Get better rates, better opportunities, better alpha, and a better trading experience. Trade smart now at kyberswap.com.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing Avocado. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains. In USDC. And native access to Instadapp's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. Avocado, one wallet to rule all chains.
All right, so just a bit of background about Aaron before we introduce him. Aaron McDonald has long been an innovator with his eye on the future across many sectors, from telecommunications to now Web3. Aaron is the founder of multiple metaverse companies developed independently, but now rolled up under one umbrella entity, an open metaverse powerhouse called Futureverse, which we're going to talk all about today. Aaron, welcome to the Edge Podcast. How are you doing?
Hey man, I'm good. Glad to be on here.
Yeah, good to talk to you. I was actually thinking about this interview just because my kids watch Bluey, and I know that Bluey, I'm fairly confident, is a product of the Australian government, which is close enough to New Zealand at least. And obviously all three of us here have kids, and I feel like this conversation runs very parallel to or tangential to all this iconic IP that we grew up with and now our kids are enjoying. And so anyways, just really interested to dig into the just massive challenge of building what we're going to call a metaverse or open metaverse company. But before we talk more about Futureverse, Aaron, can you just give us the highlights reel of your background and like all the cool stuff you've worked on in crypto prior to Futureverse.
Yeah. So my background, I've been in tech for, I think, 25 years now. I started out engineering and then kind of made my way through the business, learning different things in different parts, sales, marketing, product management, product development, business, kind of leadership and corporate venture, and then eventually made my way out into the startup world, where I got interested in Web3 kind of personally playing around 2015, 2016, and then 2016 decided to kind of get full-time into the space and started a venture studio that was helping companies to incubate and accelerate their ideas particularly around consumer adoption of Web3. So thinking about how we can improve the user experience for onboarding users and the infrastructure around how users would interact with Web3 in the real world. And we started, building that out. We grew the portfolio to around 30 different companies, and then we started to think about, if we've solved usability issues, how do we kind of get people to into the space? And content became like the thing that we felt was going to be the big user funnel for mainstream adoption. And so we started to do the same thing, find companies, incubate, accelerate companies that were building at that intersection of Web3 and content. And then after a while, we got approached by some growth stage funds, 10T being one of them, who were looking at this kind of ecosystem and said, hey, why don't you roll a bunch of those up into something that's bigger? So we did, and that's what the Futureverse became. So we pulled together 11 different companies that were either building that kind of core technology for user onboarding and interoperability, through to the games and applications experience, through to AI tools for building content in the metaverse.
That's awesome. I didn't know you had like such long roots kind of like on that user side, which obviously like dovetails perfectly into what you're doing with Futureverse. I think before we dive into Futureverse, I would just love for you to describe kind of like when you got this big idea for the metaverse, and maybe more importantly, like what the term metaverse means to you. Like, obviously that's a term that's been thrown around a lot the last few years, and we'd just love to hear what it means to you and the Futureverse team.
Yeah, I think it can be a bit of a loaded term, and I think our view of the metaverse is just is simply the internet growing up. It's if we think about kind of our lives and our society now, the digital part of that is so deeply ingrained in everything that we do that there isn't a distinction between the digital world and the physical world. People use the term digital economy as if it's some kind of separate thing to the economy. Like if we took the digital out of the economy today, we'd have no economy. We spend, the average human born in this generation will spend 44 years of their life looking at a screen. You're in the metaverse, it exists. And what we think is that the metaverse is about this kind of increasingly integrated user experience where experiences can be more immersive. So you think of like a term like immersive convergence, where silos that used to be kind of separate things start to become part of the same experience. And like a really early and simple example of that was we used to have media companies and we used to have communications companies. I was in telecommunications. And they were so separate that they had their own networks. And then we started to see social media come out and it ate both their lunches. It combined media and communications into a single user experience. And you kind of keep going down that journey. We had things like gaming and finance and commerce and all of those things were distinct things that you went to go and do in distinct places. And we see that trend of convergence starting to happen more and more. Social commerce. Commerce used to be over there, used to go to an e-commerce website and do your thing, and now commerce happens in the same space as your social. The fastest growing retail channels in the world are on TikTok. And so we see this kind of convergence happening there. You could argue DeFi is the convergence of finance and gaming. People applying game theory principles to engage users around financial applications. And so the metaverse is just the continuation of that trend of immersive convergence and breaking down the barriers. And I think one important distinction, though, is that the metaverse isn't a game or an app. It's the collection of interoperable applications, experience, and content that are grounded in user-owned data, assets, and content. Because that's what creates this kind of interoperability, which is super important for the idea of the metaverse, as opposed to what we've had in the past.
When I look at the Futureverse ecosystem, it's a collection of this like new IP that seems to serve, very different profiles, some of which, like I kind of alluded earlier to, like something like a Bluey, or one of my kids loves Scooby-Doo. And I feel like if Scooby-Doo or Bluey were recreated today, if it was starting fresh, there's this opportunity to deliver, distribute that content in a digitally native form, digitally native like platform that, benefits from some of the like permissionless like types of Legos that we all build with. So, and also I think you hit it right on the head with like the idea that like DeFi is almost like this intersection of games and finance. Some of those games suck. They're super boring.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here you go, just collateralize this and borrow that. And it's a little dull. And then sometimes we see these new applications. I kind of consider like the buying and selling of NFTs to be like technically like a DeFi use case, but it's fun because we're selling and buying things that are just more attractive to look at, more fun to show off to our friends.
More emotional, yeah. And it's not even like when people say the term gaming in reference to the metaverse, they often literally mean games. And that's a part of it. But I think that the more important thing to understand is that the notion of experience is being gamified. So it doesn't have to be a dude running around shooting something. It's just thinking about the theories of gameplay when you're designing and building your products and weaving those things into it. And if you look at things like, the way that we're doing tokens, getting tokens out to community with the Root network, we've created this Future Quest system, which is gamifying the way people participate in that activity and in growing the ecosystem and the community in the network. And so that's a good example of, using gamification in a way that isn't, directly someone running around, in a game environment.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Like, I think the definition of gamified or gamification is just going to take so many different forms. Like, it's not going to be this like skeuomorphic representation of like, oh, I'm a, player and I'm scrolling through a 2D side scroller. It's like, it can be so many different shapes and forms. So one other stat that you mentioned there that really stuck with me is the 44 years of screen time in our future. Man, that is something scary to think about. And yeah, like we are already in the metaverse. Wild. I want you to maybe speak to some of this like early IP that you've rolled up into Futureverse. So the early one that I remember, even before I kind of knew who was behind it, was these bunnies that just came on the scene. Kind of, some were scary looking. They're called Flufs. Like, maybe just give us a little bit of a history of that, and then some of the other IPs that you've created and then since rolled up.
Yeah, so Flufs was a project created by business Non-Fungible Labs, which I helped co-found. And Non-Fungible Labs was was working on how to take what was a very, lo-fi collectibles experience with NFTs and turn it into something that was more interactive. And so Flu and Flufs came out. They were the first, dynamic multimedia 3D NFT collections that allowed users to customize the way that their avatars looked and feel by being able to change the background scenes that the characters were in and the music that was behind them. And so we were thinking about like a few things in there, like how do you create content that people can feel like is their own, that isn't static, it can move with culture and with the community, and that lays the groundworks for creating a bigger world of content and characters. That got expanded out, to include the thingies, which is these 3D spiders that are actually AI brains that can generate art. And this was like way before, AIGC was a big buzz. There was the Party Bears, there's the Seekers, there's the A for All Stars, there's Gods and Goblins, there's the Atom Car Club, there's the Next Legend boxes. There's about 20 different collections within the ecosystem of, native Web3 IP. And now increasingly we're working with some of the world's largest brands to kind of bring their IP to life inside this ecosystem. Our thesis was always that if you think of like most people when they say they're building something, around the idea of the metaverse, they immediately are jumping to some application where you can go in and like be in a spot with lots of different people and characters and stuff like that. And we think they start at the end instead of starting at the beginning. In the beginning, you should start with stories, and then you can create characters out of those stories, and then you can create content on top of those characters, and then you can create activities, and then you can create spaces, and then you can create worlds and games. And so kind of that's been the thesis from the start, is kind of build this thing up so that when you get to that end goal, there's some depth there. It's not just this empty place that has nothing in it and no life and no story to tell.
Aaron, some of the different collections you were just running through there, is this more of a science or an art? Because like I look at how just like cool these are, like the Party Bears, and I want to keep in mind and level set with the fact that like I'm still DeFi dad. I don't spend a lot of time, deep in the depths of like collecting, NFT art. I at the end of the day, I think I'm like probably one of the folks who like tries to like play at the intersection of both of these. And so for someone like me to get drawn into like Flufs and AI League, it's just fun. It was a really cool sort of partnership you had with FIFA. Altered State Machine, those are so cool looking. So anyways, is this more of a science or an art?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, we have incredibly talented artists within our teams who have created these things. But at the same time, we've been a bit, deliberate about where the gaps in a collection fits from a segmentation point of view, and from an overall kind of patchwork of stories that could come together to make something more immersive and fun to experience. And so there's been very deliberate choices about what kinds of characters get introduced to fit those different segments or different kinds of things that those characters could do over time.
I want to get into this intersection of metaverse and AI. So you and I guess the ASM team, Altered State Machine, were really early to this interplay of AI and metaverse. It feels like more and more people are converging on this now in the space. Can you walk us through how AI and metaverse intersect kind of in your mind?
Yeah, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that they're two ends of the same trend. this in the kind of popular narrative, there was this, the metaverse is dead, long live AI has basically been the theme of the last, 6 months or so. I think that's very narrow-minded and short-sighted, because if for everyone out there who believes that AI GC is going to change the world, that users will be able to go and type and conjure the content and worlds and experiences that they want. That is the starting line for every great metaverse story, is a machine that enables people to bring worlds to existence. So if you believe in AI and that there's going to be these tools to create this, create this new generation of creators of content, where is that content going to live if not the metaverse? And so I think that we got this notion very early on that in order for the idea of the metaverse to become true, you'd have to make tools that enabled users to create rich experiences in the metaverse. And Altered State Machine was born out of the idea that artificial intelligence would play a huge role in the way that our digital ecosystems build out, and ownership of agents in this metaverse of experiences would be a really important thing. So team has been building on two sides. One is like protocols to create ownership of agents so that you can make them interoperable, and so that you can make them tradable and all those other cool things that come along with Web3, property ownership on the internet. And then on the other side, building the tools and the models to support a variety of different user experiences. And they're roughly in two camps. One is around creating content. So we have music generation, image generation, 3D object and character generation, automated animation of those characters and content. And then the other side, we have, what we'd call like actions, things that they can do. So ways to make those things come alive in metaverse environments. And it is, there's a big wave of hype out there, and you'll see every other day someone, doing AI in a game, which is generally just like their characters talk to ChatGPT, and be 1,000 of these startups and projects that come to market with their stuff. But we've been thinking about this for a long time, and actually solving the hard problems around how do you scale this stuff up to work inside of economies that exist in the game world. Like the FIFA AI League you mentioned earlier. There are 8 AI agents playing in each one of those matches, and we've been able to design technology, that patent pending technology that enables us to scale training of millions of avatars at economics that work for free-to-play mobile gaming. And so, the hype is real in the sense that AI will change the landscape for content creation and experiences on the internet and a whole bunch of things across lots of industries. But most people don't even realize the problems they're going to have to solve yet, that we've been working on now for 5 or 6 years. And so when this all starts to kind of get out into the hands of users, they'll be able to get an aha moment. Okay, these guys have thought deeply about how all these layers come together from infrastructure up to experience and in a really integrated way.
Yeah, I feel like builders like you're dealing with limited, battle-tested building blocks. And a few of those that we all now, I think, have more confidence in are like digitally native money. We've got digitally native finance. We've got whatever you want to classify NFTs as, like digitally native ownership of just anything that you want, which is really cool. And then we've got digitally native intelligence that's now in development with AI. So you think about like what other fundamental foundational building blocks are coming, and then all the creative things that are going to come from people working on that. And honestly, I feel like in just the past 30 minutes talking, I'm like having that like realization again that like, God, we are so early, because there are going to be not just tens of millions of people, but hundreds of millions, billions of people that are working and benefiting from businesses, ideas, projects, whatever, that are using all of this. And it's just kind of like thinking about what you said, the next evolution of the internet. One specific use case that we haven't talked about that I really wanted to get your take on, and it doesn't sit within the Futureverse ecosystem yet. You know, adult content has always been at the bleeding edge of technology. How do you start to think about that? Because it still has this like taboo sort of like nature to it. And I feel like adult content is the adult industry, however you want to classify that. It's going to be quick to adopt Web3 metaverse related technology.
Yeah, I mean, without kind of saying anything I shouldn't, I think it's a really interesting space. And you're right that adult content has led adoption in lots of different kinds of technologies on the internet, and I don't think there will be an exception here. It's a fascinating space with, I think, lots and lots of potential to change the way that market dynamics work and content production works. There have been a couple of things that have popped up in the AI space that have become very popular very quickly and then shut down equally quickly by payment rails, and banks who couldn't get their moral sign off for getting behind those things, and so that is naturally going to push people into Web3 permissionless money payment systems for these things, because humans want to consume this stuff. It's not something you can hide from. It's part of humanity that we like sex. It's the literal reason we exist. And so that is definitely coming. I think it's coming hard and fast for that sector of content for sure.
One thing you were talking about earlier, Aaron, was just this focus on scalability almost from the outset, like the very beginning. I've seen the opposite approach. Like I saw Dapper Labs with like CryptoKitties and then NBA Top Shot. They kind of did the same thing twice. Like I know they thought they had the infrastructure figured out with like the Flow blockchain, but then they ran into this massive payment KYC AML situation because they got too big and they couldn't process payments fast enough, and another massive bottleneck. So I definitely think there's obviously something to addressing, like creating all that underlying infrastructure. Like if you think you're going to be successful, plan for success. Don't plan to be successful and then, you're completely screwed, right? That kind of brings us into, you went out and built a new blockchain, the Root Network. So, I mean, that is like a monumental lift to just, spin up. I use the term spin up like it's that easy, a new L1. I'm just curious, like, what made you feel like you needed to build something from scratch and not, utilize any pre-existing infrastructure for what you're building?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a really simple answer to that. It took a while to get to that point, but when we went out there and talked to folks around what their chain did that was different to, say, Ethereum, almost universally, the answer was it's faster and cheaper. And so while faster and cheaper is a problem space that's important, it was not the problem space we felt was going to make the difference for users. So let's say fast and cheap is a solved problem. What's actually going to make the difference? Because we've had fast and cheap for a while, and despite the fact that there are 320 odd million holders of crypto in the world, only a fraction of those actually interact with the blockchain directly, and even fewer with DeFi apps, and even fewer with NFTs. And why is that? In a segment of people who are obviously open to risk and early adopters, do we get such low, flow through or such high drop off? And that is because the onboarding and user experience is crap. It is terrible. And so when we thought about what we needed to do to win new customers and new users into Web3, it became much more about that onboarding experience and the user safety journey from there. And the only way to address that is to think differently about how the blockchain's set up. And so we built Root starting with user experience, not starting with how to make a faster Ethereum or a smarter Bitcoin, which has been the premise for pretty much every other chain out there. With one exception, actually, I think the Sui guys, they have, I think, a very similar philosophy to us in terms of thinking about what creates good user adoption, user experience pathways. But outside that, no one I've spoken to ever once mentioned user experience in their rationale for why they built their networks the way they did. And so, we've taken the view that to provide the best user experience in the open metaverse, we need to start with a vertically integrated approach so that everything knits together nicely and can create that overall user experience when they're using applications and content within the ecosystem, and provide those tools out to developers and builders so that they can build on top of that.
So most of the collections we've talked through, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe most of those were NFTs that ultimately got sold on Ethereum layer 1. How are you thinking then about future in terms of Root, the legacy that has been built already there with NFTs that were on Ethereum layer 1, and then we have this exploding ecosystem of L2s. Are you thinking of it all being interoperable across everything? I'm almost trying to hone in on what at a high level do you think will hinge more on the Root network versus everything that sort of lives across all these different L1s and L2s?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, we're not one-chain maxis. I just don't think that you can be. I don't think you can believe in decentralization and at the same time believe that one chain rules them all, because they're kind of opposing viewpoints. And so our kind of architectural approach is to support a multi-chain experience. We think users will choose to anchor assets in different spaces, or companies will, or IP creators will, and there's this kind of misnomer that NFTs make interoperable content easy. They actually, if anything, make it worse. While the ERC token ERC 721 or 1155 token standards are great for on-chain token interoperability, they do absolutely nothing for actual content interoperability. And there is no standardized way or ontology for data to be written to those things that makes it easy for applications to make them interoperable. And so what we've done with the Root network and FuturePass is create a system where users can aggregate content across multiple chains, and then developers can embed in the asset register those tokens with an ontology that supports an interoperability. And so we're definitely of the view that a multi-chain future exists, but that as a core interoperability layer, the Root can play an important part to connect the data across those different chains in a way that is meaningfully useful to applications who want to make that content interoperable. And the same with identity, because you think about assets and identity in the same bucket. providing a core place where your identity can live in a safe space and have the ability to then control applications and accounts from that core identity as well.
Aaron, if we shift gears to thinking more about the operations of Futureverse, which is just overwhelming for me to even consider. I don't think I've ever had a day where I envy just how expansive this mission is that you're working on. So given what uncharted territory we're in, how do you begin to think about measuring success yourself as like the lead, the head of Futureverse? And then maybe if you could call out the next closest milestone that you're looking forward to in terms of measuring that success.
Yeah, I think like we can chunk things down into immediate and medium term and long term goals. Like in the immediate term, it's very product focused, and like the big thing that's going on at the moment is spinning up the root network and getting that out into the hands of the community, and really starting to grow the ecosystem around that on one side. On the other side, it's packaging all the tools we've been working on internally and making those available to developers and creators. And so it's kind of very kind of initially product heavy focus of getting these kind of first building blocks out there and into the hands of people who can go and make something of them. In the kind of medium term focus to long term focus, it's really around user adoption. It's like kind of taking those products and empowering the content experiences and the brand partnerships we have to go out there and reach those new audiences. And along that journey, look at different milestones for user adoption, and going from where we are today up into millions and millions of users. So, so I think like mix of product milestones in the short term to medium term, and then adoption milestones in the long term.
Aaron, I don't know if we've talked to anybody yet that's talked about users, user adoption, and just mentioned the term users so many times. I think it's a good thing. And you're right. There's not many blockchains that are built for users first. In fact, I find them all quite hard to use in the beginning. I want to talk a bit about how you've gone about attracting IP and other dApps, I guess, to come and build on the root network. Has it been harder or easier than expected? And then I had another question about partnerships, but I think we can just roll those into one. Maybe speak to some of the other big partnerships that I know we've talked a little bit about FIFA and the AI League, but any other kind of major IPs building on Futureverse, and then maybe give us some alpha. Like what don't we know about? Can you drop some breaking news here? No pressure.
To answer the first part, our approach to building adoption in the developer ecosystem is comes from a few points. First of all, create this center of content that gives us like a bootstrap. You've seen a lot of that out there already. Then second stage is to use the tools that created that content to onboard, bigger brands and create a center of gravity of users with those brands. And then the stage after that is where you really kind of push hard into the developer ecosystem. And that's a very common approach for platform builders. You think of how AWS started. They started being their own customer with Amazon, and then they started to onboard some big heavy users. And then once they figured out how to make that work and scale, they started to go out and penetrate into the mass market. The iOS App Store started with Apple's apps that you use on your phone every day. And then they went and got some big boys, Microsoft, all those kind of brands to build the first, tranche of applications to create that user gravity. And then the next stage is kind of the broader developer market. So we're taking the same approach. You've got to give developers both financial incentives and a user base to want to build from. And so we have to try and bootstrap those two first things with our own content first and the partner content second. Not to say that we're not in parallel working on the broader developer ecosystem. So we, just launched the Outlier Basecamp for startups who are wanting to come and build with the Futureverse and on the Root network. And so the Born Ready Basecamp is going to start that job of getting into the next layer of developers. A little bit of alpha. We signed a deal recently, and I won't name names, but to make a large strategic investment in a company that has a huge amount of penetration in the game developer market. And so we're doing moves along the way to make sure that we can get in front of developers and start to build that pipeline of people who want to build inside of the Futureverse ecosystem with us, with companies who are aligned to the same values that we have about the open metaverse. So yeah, that's kind of roughly our strategy is, build from the core out and create the gravity that brings those developers in. And then in terms of the brands and the IP, I can't really say more than what's in the public domain now, but if people are watching closely, they'll definitely have been picking up on some hints of other partners that we'll be announcing in the kind of latter half of this year. So stay tuned, folks.
You must just get sick of this. Like you drop so much, and then we're always like, "What's next? Give us more.
I know.
Tell us another name, Aaron."
And the good thing is, like, we're signing them up persistently. I think the idea that Web3 and the metaverse is dead in the minds of corporates and brands is totally wrong. They might not be out there shouting it from the rooftops because that's not what's sexy for their shareholders, but they are very aware of the fact that this is going to change the way consumers interact on the internet, and they don't want to miss the boat.
So yeah, we've talked a bit about, I guess, the developer side, partnership landscape, and we've kind of talked about the users a bit, but what sort of strategies or kind of onboarding principles are you bringing to Web3 to actually bring users here and make it as frictionless as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you look at the Futureverse strategy, the first point in our strategy is make the technology invisible. Make it feel like magic. And so that says everything about how we think about onboarding users, is they should be using this stuff without even thinking of it. And if you think of like AI League, which is well over 200,000 downloads now in its first month, I guarantee you 95% of those people have no idea that there's a blockchain behind it.
Aaron, sorry to interrupt, but how many downloads did you say?
Well over 200,000.
Wow. I didn't know it was that high. I think the last tweet I saw you do was around 50,000, 50K. So that's phenomenal.
No,
congrats,
it's racing up. We'll be 500,000 not too distant future. Yeah. So our goal is to make the technology invisible. And I think one of the things that's probably hindered Web3 and NFTs and crypto in general is the idea that we shove technology in people's faces. There's a very small segment of the world that actually gives a shit about that stuff. And most people are just interested in what the thing does for them, not how it works. And so we're very, very focused on removing those, friction points in the user experience around Web3 so that people can just use it as if they were using any other application in the world.
Aaron, while we've got you, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on Web3 gaming, but the whole conversation has me now like questioning what I would define as Web3 gaming. Like, I think a lot of the mechanics that go into the IP that you work on, you could ultimately classify this all as gaming. And so I guess if I do define it as like a format of a game, like a battle royale type game, or maybe a trading card game, something that's very familiar to us in the Web 2 gaming world or traditional gaming world, how do you begin to think about, like, I'm going to call it like Web 3 accelerated gaming or Web 3 improved gaming? Like, what do we need for the mainstream to just go wild for this, to be able to overcome the challenges of setting up a wallet or doing all the sorts of things that we do as like crypto natives?
Well, first of all, don't make them do that. I mean, that's what FuturePass is about. You can go into FuturePass and sign up now for a FuturePass, and we don't even call it a wallet, because like, who the knows what that is? So I think, being, de-jargonizing things is a big part of that. The second thing is make good games first. The Web3 gaming space was and largely is shit because people thought about how to make tokens work, not how to make fun games. So I think we'll see shortly, and it's not just us, there are some other really great teams out there that are going to bring to market some compelling experiences that are new and show why this technology can provide a different and fun user experience. The over-financialization of content and gaming within the Web3 space, I think, was a big slowdown, caused a big slowdown in the adoption of this stuff. Because if you step back from it and talk to gamers about, what would they like to see and what's important to them, like things like ownership are important. And we kind of ruined the opportunity by over-financializing these collectibles for creating, value and a stream of, fans and users who actually value the underlying capability that this technology provides. And I think it's one of those things that you can have all the arguments you like, for or against whether this, is the right thing to do or not. But you can't escape the fact that openness wins on the internet, that value as a native internet protocol will exist in the mainstream. And so the technology that powers all of those gaming experiences in the future will be anchored in Web3. And if we do our job well enough, no one will know.
That's awesome. And I totally agree. The token side of just making the tokens work really took precedent there for a while. And, as like a longtime gamer myself, but also like a speculator, there was something about that still drew me in, of course. And I hope there's still a happy medium for certain games where they get that formula right, where the game can still be fun. There can still be that element of like tokenization to it, and just kind of figure out that delicate dance. But I know it's not easy to do. It's really not.
I think I'm not saying that the economic aspects aren't important. They are, because you can't have an open internet which is supported by open infrastructure without financial incentives. That doesn't work. And so a core reason why decentralization exists is the financial game that is being played by people who are running infrastructure. And it's super important. It's just not important for everyone. It's important for the small number of specialized users that get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. And I think there's been a tendency in the Web3 space to drop everyone into the same segment. And if you look at any mature market in the world or product in the world, the marketing people in those products and businesses are doing fine-grained segmentation of users and funneling them into the right experience for where their interest is. And so it's great to have a core community like ours, very strong, loyal, gets the infrastructure game that's being played, helps bootstrap that ecosystem, and they should be rewarded for doing that. because they're contributing to the infrastructure that makes this stuff work. But not everyone has to play that game.
Yeah, totally agree. There'll be further segmentation once the space matures and grows and more players come into it.
You have to be active about it, though. You can't just say, segmentation is going to happen. You have to go out and do the research to find the segments and then develop those segments. They just don't appear.
Okay, you mentioned FuturePass, and another thing that I guess users can now do is go check their FutureScore. I went and checked mine while we're on this pod, and it's 210. Is that good or bad?
It's good for you.
Am I going to make it? I am just a small player.
Everything above 0, you're going to make it.
Okay, so it's better to have a high number. Okay, got it. Okay. Maybe fill us in on what FutureScore is, and then I've seen, I guess the first quest was to link your FuturePass, check your FutureScore, but I feel like there's going to be more quests to come.
Yeah.
Can you give us any indications on what those might look like or what's to come?
Yeah, no. So I think for those of you who don't know, FutureScore is, for one of a better reference point, a loyalty system that allows our community members to accumulate points based on the things they own and the things they do. And so if you're an active participant in the ecosystem, your score will grow. It could be by buying a collectible and holding it. Could depend on the rarity of that thing. It'll depend on how long you've held it for or continue to hold it for. The things you do, if we put these quests and challenges out there that help us test different parts of the network or grow the community or grow the infrastructure, and you complete those things, that'll improve your score. If you go out and recruit people to come and join the Futureverse, that'll improve your score. So there's all these different mechanisms to actually drive meaningful user adoption and infrastructure adoption. I think a lot of projects out there, they try and recruit users through things like airdrops and stuff like that, and it creates transient users that don't really add long-term value to the protocol. And so FutureScore is designed to create real, active community members who are growing that infrastructure and participating in the economy. That works hand in hand with future quests. And so when we issue a quest, there'll be a reward in root tokens aligned to that quest. And the higher your score, the higher number of root tokens you get for that quest. And the first quest was just to simply generate your score. But actually in that quest, we're doing some pretty cool things, which was allowing you to join multiple wallets into your same FuturePass, and starts to allow users to do things like account delegation within that, so that they can, have things that live in different spaces, but that they can aggregate into a single view for applications that want to interact with that content, and that users can control those different things from one identity point. And there's a whole lineup of quests coming up afterwards. I think we're very close to announcing Quest 2. If you've been keeping track of what's going on in the social channels, you'll know that staking's the next big thing we're talking about now, so you can expect a quest associated with that. So get on the lookout and help come and build out the proof of stake system within the root network.
That's awesome. I think I even saw with the staking element, there's like a tiered system where you can just be a very passive staker, take no risk and receive a reward, or you can I think delegate to a certain validator and maybe take more risk in that validator. So if you know a competent validator, you can kind of back them.
Yeah, I think that again, everything we're doing is designed to allow users to glide into more and more responsibility as a Web3 citizen. And so providing the opportunity to participate in a low friction, simple way for people to get their heads around, and then build up to, the top level, which is being a validator yourself. And as we go through that journey, gamifying how people become participants in running infrastructure on the networks. Look out for some cool little things there.
I love, as we're talking here, I'm like having FOMO over that. And I just got onto, for those that are new to this, you go to futurepass.futureverse.app and just follow the prompts. It's really easy. It doesn't cost any gas either if you've got, one of the really common wallets, something like a MetaMask. But the best way to gamify this is to just have one of your best friends say on a podcast that, they were checking their score and you're like, hold on a sec, I can do that.
It works. It
really does.
Pretty sure my score isn't good though, so you can probably accrue that pretty quick there, DeFi Dad. No worries, man. Aaron, another thing I saw recently that was really cool, and it came through Billboard of all places, was this release of Gen 1. Can you speak a bit about this? And then maybe how might this integrate into Futureverse suite of products and NFTs, if I think that's where it might be going?
Yeah, so Gen 1 came out of our altered state machine research team, and Gen 1 is JEN. Jen is your kind of personal music producer, and she helps anyone create the music that exists in their head. We've been working on music for a while now, and our team of PhDs published a paper recently which outlined our approach to Gen 1 and some samples comparing it to Meta's model and Google's model. And if you go and read, if you have an inclination on the academic side, you can go and read the paper itself. If you go and jump into futureverse.com under the research section, there's also a what the F is Gen 1, which is a series that will go alongside our academic papers to kind of break them down into simple language, so you can learn a little bit more if you're not so academically inclined. But the core, the essence of it was that Gen was designed based on the way people hear music. And a lot of the models before that ignored the way that the frequency of music hits the human ear. And so our research team built a model that takes that into account and also provides a whole bunch of, features which enable higher quality music production and can work hand in hand with professional music creators. We've been very deliberate with Gen to consult with the music industry, producers and publishers and labels and artists and in that process and what they want to see in an AI tool, and also how we can respect creators in the process of training these models as well. And so those are like really core principles. We'll start to talk more about the business around Gen and the partners that we've got in the music industry around that as we get closer to launching Gen to the public. In terms of the intersection between Gen and NFTs, our view on a lot of these AI creator tools, so if you think about what I said earlier about being able to type the worlds you imagine into existence, music and sound effects play a big part in our experience of those worlds. And so that was one of those tools. There are 5 core generative tools that work together to spawn worlds. So where we look at the intersection of that and NFTs is if you can play with Gen as a Web 2 type experience, like you would with Midjourney or anything like that, and kind of not have to think about too much about how blockchain and NFTs work. But the moment you want to make something tradable or sellable, it becomes an NFT. And in this case, we're linking things like music tracks to brains. If you're in the ASM community, you know what brains are. You want to save a music track or playlist and make it tradable or usable in an interoperable metaverse environment, save it as a memory to a brain. And so the idea is for all of the things you want to that are intelligent and you want to make tradable. That's why ASM brains exist. And a lot of people thought of them, I think, initially as just for characters, and they are good for characters. But we've got dozens of different kinds of things that can create intelligent, interactable content within these worlds, that brains will be the key to how that content works. We'll be showing some of that stuff shortly in a sandbox for users to start to play with. And again, I think demonstrate how far ahead in the thinking our team is about how these things come together in a gaming environment than what perhaps people have seen to date.
Aaron, given everything we've discussed today, how do you segment your time, and where do you find that you're spending more of your time? Like, this could be a two-part question. Where do you have to spend more of your time versus like where do you want to spend more of your time when it comes to everything within Futureverse?
Yeah, and I think I have like a really good leadership team. So I spend time with them and understanding how to help them go faster and do better. And so that's kind of my core job, I guess, as CEO, is to empower those people to be successful and, get under the skin of what's going to help make that happen. I spend another big chunk of time on the kind of big partnership opportunities. When it gets to the stage that our partnership team's kind of formed up something that that could be an opportunity. Usually it'll need some input in that process from me and Shara often to close those out. And so that's something that I'm kind of persistently involved in. Doing stuff like this, getting out there and spreading the word and evangelizing what Futureverse is and why you should care. And then if you kind of look at the things I love doing, I'm a product guy at heart. I always have been, and so I like to get my hands dirty with my product team. We don't have a chief product officer, so I fill that role myself. Because I like to be hands-on, and I think it's really important to have my ethos and vision as a founder like deeply imprinted inside the product area. Plus, it's fun for me. So yeah.
Aaron, we also know you as like a major capital allocator in the crypto Web3 space. So as fellow investors, also just curious, what are you most interested in or most excited to invest in moving forward in this space?
Yeah, I think, the great news is in, markets like this, you get the real builders, shining through a bit more. There's less trash to wade through. And so there's lots of opportunities to get alongside founders in this space. We obviously have a bias towards those who are solving those interoperability issues or user adoption issues, or who are creating, great next generation content experiences. And so we're on the hunt for companies who are building technology or IP properties in those areas. We're I think in a market where if you have conviction, it's a good time to invest. We've been very lucky in Futureverse to have investors who have high conviction, like 10T and Ripple, who have been able to see through, the cycles and look for people who can kind of build value, intra-cycle. So I think, it's a really good time to be an investor because you've got higher quality projects with people who have high conviction and less trash to wade through.
Yeah, well said. I am bursting at the seams to deploy more capital in this market. I could not be more bullish and have more conviction that like this is a space that's going to still grow 1,000x in the next 10 years. And we're actually at that point in the cycle where there is some like open mockery of like the crypto Web3 space, and that's my favorite part of every bear totally. Cycle, because we're just around the corner from things really exploding to the upside. Well, this is a great place for us to wrap up. I want to remind listeners, first off, they should learn more about Futureverse by going to futureverse.com. They should also go to the link tree. So just go to linktree/Futureverse. Great place to find all the most important links related to Futureverse. They should follow Futureverse on Twitter. It's just Futureverse. Follow Aaron, of course, on Twitter. It's Aaron MCDNZ. We'll put this all into the show notes and on screen for you. And then if you want to mint a Future Pass, which is free, doesn't cost any gas. I did it while we were on the podcast here. Go to futureverse.com/futurepass. Aaron, I want to give you the last word then. I feel like we've raked you over the coals in terms of asking you every bit of alpha and what's coming next. But yeah, I'll give you the final word. If there's anything else to share in terms of the roadmap for the rest of 2023 or milestones that we can look forward to.
Yeah, no, I think like now's the best time. There's never been a better time to get involved with the Futureverse, ecosystem. We are on the precipice of all the stuff, coming to market, and the culmination of those years of work coming out and putting in front of people. You can see the momentum building already, both on the research side, academic side, the product side, the network side, the content side, experience side. It's all coming together really well. So yeah, if you haven't checked us out, come and have a look at what we're building. We'd love to have you in the community. They're very welcoming and knowledgeable, and jump in the Discords and stuff, and our community members will get you up to speed on everything Futureverse.
I can tell you, I can't wait to someday watch Seekers on Netflix, or have it be in some metaverse powered platform through Futureverse. Party Bears, Flufs. I look at all this IP, and it really does feel like it goes up against the likes of the IP that we all grew up with, and so just congrats on that. That is something to me that, if I had to answer my question earlier about is it a science or an art, it's both. But the science behind it, for me, just it's so difficult to repeatably create this great IP, this again iconic IP, and so I am just always an admirer of these new collections that you've put out, and I'm really interested to know what's coming next. But there's just so much in there that it feels like it's going to appeal to many generations to come. It's just a matter of us continuing to build that out and to have the distribution that is the metaverse mature to a place where everyone has access to it.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.